I want you to imagine, just for a second, an elite academic institution.
Right.
But I need you to scrub your mind of the usual fantasy cliches. So forget the dark, dusty libraries, the solitary candlelit desks, and, the secret hidden passageways.
The standard wizard school stuff?
Exactly. Instead, picture a campus where the dorm rooms are intentionally designed to be boring, where your morning coffee literally borrows energy from your own future.
Which is wild.
It is. And where hiding in your room to study isn't just frowned upon, it is considered a fundamental architectural failure. Welcome to the deep dive.
We have been digging through a, frankly, overwhelming stack of internal documents from Mannheim Academy this week. And you're completely right to start with that contrast because this place completely upends our usual ideas about how learning, and specifically how magic, is actually supposed to work.
The stack we are unpacking today is massive. I mean, we have student profiles, architectural blueprints, cafeteria menus, syllabi, all zooming in on one specific house at Mannheim, which is the Golden Eagle.
Yeah, the Golden Eagles.
And going through these sources, the primary thing that jumps out is how absolutely exhausted they are by the classic trope of the isolated, secretive magic scholar.
Oh, they don't just dislike that trope. They fundamentally reject the premise that knowledge should be hoarded.
Right.
The core philosophy of the Golden Eagles is built on a very specific magical theory, which is that magic behaves differently when it's observed. So their entire existence, from the buildings they live in to the food they eat to the way they cast their spells, it's a massive ongoing experiment in hypervisibility.
Hypervisibility.
Yeah, they literally call it the serious business of being seen. They believe that knowledge is something you share in the light, ideally at a long table, with as many witnesses as possible.
Which brings us perfectly to their campus layout, the Golden Eagle's castle. Looking at these blueprints, calling it a castle almost feels like a misnomer, honestly.
It really does.
It's essentially a public square with academic accreditation. There are absolutely no dark corridors. There are no funnels to trap you or tuck you away somewhere.
Just overlapping courtyards.
Courtyards, arcades, balconies, you can see across the space at almost all times. It forces unavoidable connection.
And that forced connection is entirely by design. The architecture is actively manipulating student behavior here. Take their dormitories, which they call the nest.
Right, the nest.
If you're an elite student at a magical academy, you might expect lavish, sprawling personal quarters, right? Velvet drapes, towering bookshelves.
Right, the classic cozy study room.
But the Golden Eagle dorms are intentionally underwhelming. They're incredibly small, they're sparse, and the windows are specifically placed to look outward, right back toward those communal courtyards.
I love that detail. The orientation of those windows is such a brilliant passive-aggressive design choice. The internal documents literally state, your life is elsewhere.
Because the unspoken architectural lesson of the nest is that solitude is a tool, not a home.
Wow, solitude is a tool.
Not a home. The building is actively nudging students back into the world. It makes staying inside feel incomplete. If you are sitting in your sparse room, looking out the window at the vibrant courtyards, the architecture is essentially whispering to you to reintegrate, to go circulate your ideas.
Look, I get the philosophy of constant exposure, but reading through these blueprints, this just sounds like an introvert's absolute nightmare.
Oh, absolutely.
Is it actually effective, or is it just architectural hazing? Because it sounds like you can't even take a walk without being caught in a conversation.
It's very easy to view it as hazing, but the social friction is the point. They have this liminal space called the Outlook, which perfectly illustrates this.
The lounge that isn't really a lounge.
Exactly. It's technically a lounge, but it barely announces itself as a room. The seating arrangements just bleed naturally into the main pathways. The design notes specified that the Outlook doesn't gather people, it catches them.
Right, so you're just trying to walk to class on a Tuesday afternoon, you pause to tie your shoe, and suddenly you are roped into a heavy debate on spell theory because the seating practically tripped you into a conversation.
Exactly. You literally stumble into academia. And at the heart of the campus, you have the Eagle's Nest.
The primary recreational space.
Right. And it features these massive public murals. But the crucial detail here is that they aren't precious about this art. These murals are explicitly designed to be painted, repainted, defaced, and argued over daily.
It's a living document.
It is. It proves to the students that art, play, and even destruction aren't distractions from learning. They are essential to the cultural exchange.
But operating at that level of constant public engagement sounds exhausting. I mean, you'd burn out in a week.
You really would.
which explains why Manaheim Academy has engineered their food and drink to literally fuel this chaos. I was completely geeking out over the mechanics of their cafeteria.
The stat-altering brew.
Yes, let's look at those. Their coffee doesn't just wake you up. If you drink a brew made from the balanced Novolok bean or the complex Jambi bean, it accelerates your cognition. In their terms, it gives you a +2 to your focus stat. But there is a massive structural catch.
The biological cost.
Right.
The magic in the coffee pulls energy from the near future.
Which is such a wild concept. In practical terms, it means a student can cram a week's worth of a complex spell theory into a single night.
Because you get that +2 to focus right now.
But it's a biological loan. Because in the very next time cycle, you are hit with a -2 to focus. You are essentially borrowing energy from your Thursday to survive your Tuesday, knowing full well you're going to be a walking zombie by the end of the week.
And the students have to weigh those tactical choices constantly. It's not just a free boost. And it's not just the coffee either. The culinary magic is deeply specialized across the board.
Like the smoothies.
Yeah, smoothies combine living elements to open neural channels, giving a temporary boost to creativity. Certain teas are brewed to soften perception and align emotional channels, which enhances empathy.
And if they need physical endurance?
They rely on heavy, fortified bone broths. Broths made from Highland Longhorn cattle, which they call keef, or wild boar. Those are specifically designed to fortify physical athletics.
And it's not just what they consume, but how they consume it. The Golden Eagles dine in Yellow Hall, and again, the architecture refuses to let you hide.
There are no quiet, tucked-away booths.
None. It's just massive, long communal tables. And the menus are built around rotating world stations, emphasizing a concept they call history on a plate.
Because the underlying philosophy of Yellow Hall is that understanding begins with exposure. You don't just consume calories. You are forced to learn about the origin, the culture, and the intention behind the meal.
You're breaking bread with people outside your immediate circle because the tables literally demand it.
And that relentless engagement bleeds into their athletics, too.
Oh, Manable. The notes for their practice field are fascinating.
It's not your standard flat pitch.
Not at all. The field is an elevated plateau on the cliffs with floating platforms and glowing orbs. They heavily emphasize aerial strategy. But the key takeaway for the Golden Eagles team is that you cannot be a lone wolf in the air.
Right, because success on those floating platforms depends entirely on synchronization and trust over individual brilliance.
Exactly. But if we pull back and look at the sociological impact of all this.
It's heavy.
It is. If you're constantly observed, if your dorm pushes you out, if your meals are public events, and your sports require mind-meld levels of synchronization, what is the psychological toll?
It's immense. Living in a house that demands that level of hypervisibility creates a massive burden. And when we dive into the student profiles, we see this recurring theme, which is that performance becomes a form of armor.
And we have a stack of student profiles that illustrate exactly how heavy that armor can be. Let's look at Aiden Baumgartner for a second. Known around the house as the thespian.
A chaos magic student.
Right, and he enters every lecture hall like it's a stage he owns. But his internal profile reveals a deep vulnerability. His greatest fear isn't failing a class. His greatest fear is irrelevance.
For Aiden, being ordinary feels dangerously close to being visible.
Yeah.
He uses humor as a delivery system because it allows him to control the narrative. Think about it. If magic behaves differently when observed, as the Golden Eagles believe, then Aiden has internalized the idea that if he isn't being observed, his magic, and by extension his worth, is functionally weaker.
You see a very similar survival mechanism with Victoria Moretti. They call her the actress.
She specializes in fey magic, right?
Fey magic and vocal enchantments. Her voice is so powerful it can literally trigger emotional amplification in a crowded room. But her profile notes that she equates being seen with being valued.
Which is a dangerous game.
Her deepest anxiety is the silence that follows when the applause stops. If Victoria isn't actively performing and receiving feedback, she questions whether she even exists.
Both Aiden and Victoria use charm and talent to manage their visibility. But then you have students who navigate this pressure cooker by simply cranking their volume up to 11 and refusing to apologize for it.
Yes, the ones who demand gravity. Like Eleni Kennedy Vlahos.
EKV.
EKV, exactly.
Right.
Her title is The Debater. She specializes in mind-shielding magic, and she argues with maximum wattage. The most telling anecdote in her profile is that she once continued a fierce debate during an active fire drill.
That is dedication.
People constantly tell her to modulate her tone, to be quieter, to shrink her brilliance so she doesn't make others uncomfortable.
But she flatly refuses. EKV stance is that too much can also mean undeniable.
I love that. Undeniable.
She isn't performing for applause like Victoria, she is performing for space. And right alongside her is Jean-Paul McCormick, or JP the Delinquent.
JP is a pyromancy student with a white mohawk and a permanently loud punk aesthetic. His profile is surprisingly poignant, though. It notes that he learned very early on in life that quiet people get stepped on.
So his entire loud persona is a calculated countermeasure.
Yeah.
JP doesn't actually harbor a desire to be purely disruptive. He just wants gravity. He wants people to listen when he speaks. And in an environment as loud and chaotic as the Golden Eagles, he has decided that demanding attention through friction is the only reliable way to get respect.
Manaheim's architecture and culture don't just create brilliant mages, they intentionally manufacture this pressure cooker of imposter syndrome to force innovation. Which brings us to a massive problem for the innovators in the house.
The ones building the systems.
Exactly. Look at Mikaya Mizukari, known as Mika the Hacker. She specializes in mana technology. She actively breaks the Academy's most complex enchantments just to prove the systems are inefficient.
Mika is undeniably brilliant, but she secretly fears that people only value her for her utility.
The tragedy of being a human master key.
Exactly. She worries that if she ever stops fixing things or breaking things to fix them better, the community will just abandon her.
And then you have Grant Runto, the Pinkerer, who shares that exact same engineered insecurity.
The guy building mechs overnight.
Out of pure manic curiosity. He's described as a whirlwind of sparks and hot metal. But privately, he worries that his intelligence is dismissed as accidental. He fears the rest of the house just sees him as a scattered novelty, a gadget kid, rather than a true engineering mind.
So if the entire campus is built for JP and EKV to shout, and for Aiden and Victoria to perform, you have to wonder how the students who can't shout keep from being entirely erased.
How do the introverts survive in a system designed to expose them?
That is easily the most compelling dynamic in these sources, because they don't just survive, they wield a completely different kind of gravity.
They practice a quiet defiance.
They really do. They become the invisible infrastructure of the house. Let's analyze Lachlan Reyes, the sweetheart. He's a psychic student.
The notes describe his influence as ambient.
Ambient, yes. He has the rare ability to soothe and stabilize a frantic room without saying a single word.
But because he is gentle, people constantly project their own biases onto him. They misread his quietness as fragility or just passivity. His profile notes how deeply he resents that distortion.
But importantly, he refuses to harden his personality just to be easily understood by louder people.
He maintains his softness as a structural anchor.
Right. And then there's Odin LaRose, the hipster. He's a dream craft student. He has pink hair and a very calm, curated aesthetic presence. While the rest of the house is shouting over each other in the outlook, Odin simply listens with unusual attentiveness.
And when he finally does speak, his observations are so precise and cutting that even senior professors pause to listen.
Odin proves that gentleness can command attention without demanding it. He doesn't need to shout, because his insight is undeniable.
Which brings us to Neil Nicolio. They call him the Rat.
Which sounds like an insult.
It really does, but in the context of Manaheim, it's actually a testament to his survival skills.
Yeah, exactly. Neil is an alchemy student, and alchemy is fundamentally about understanding base components, the raw materials of reality.
And Neil has applied that to the school itself.
He knows the actual hidden map of Manaheim. He knows the maintenance corridors, the social blind spots, the ways around the official loud pathways.
He is constantly overlooked by the performers. But Neil doesn't want reverence. He doesn't want a throne or an audience. He just wants legitimacy.
A seat at the table.
Exactly. A guaranteed seat at the table when things truly break, because he knows he's the only one who actually understands how the building works underneath all the magical theory.
All of these wildly divergent survival strategies, the loud brilliance and the quiet defiance, they are ultimately guided by their house director.
Professor Calvin Flavio.
They call him the Wanderer.
His pedagogical approach sounds incredible. He teaches a philosophy called Find Your Own Sky, which eschews rigid academic frameworks in favor of messy exploration.
He does, but his profile reveals why he teaches that way. Professor Flavio has a deeply uneasy relationship with stillness.
Yeah, this part was fascinating.
He actually bears a faint, glowing shackle mark on his skin. It's a residue from prior entanglements with restrictive magic, and the incredible detail is that this scar literally glows in the presence of confinement spells.
So he is physically and psychologically terrified of being trapped.
Exactly. He worries that his own life is just a sum of improvised errors. But that vulnerability is exactly what makes him the perfect guide for the Golden Eagles.
Because in an environment that forces constant exposure, he teaches the students that you can choose your own path, make massive public errors, survive the embarrassment of them, and still return with something deeply worth offering to the world.
He shifts the goalposts for them. He shows them that perfection isn't the goal of hypervisibility.
The goal is the
The
experience.
experience, the exposure, and the connection. It's a fascinating sociological framework, and it really makes you look at our modern environments differently.
Absolutely.
Think about modern open-plan offices for a second. We think we're inventing collaboration spaces,
Mhm.
but the Golden Eagles figured out centuries ago that if you force visibility without providing the emotional infrastructure to handle it, you just get performance anxiety.
You just get a room full of people performing.
Right. It makes you evaluate how you occupy your own spaces.
Hmm.
So for everyone listening, ask yourself, are you performing loudly out of a fear of irrelevance, like Aiden? Or are you the quiet, invisible infrastructure holding your team together, like Odin and Lachlan?
It forces you to look at whether your environment is serving you or if you are just serving it. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Building on the Golden Eagles philosophy. Think back to the Eagle's Nest, that communal lounge we talked about with the massive public murals.
The ones that get painted over.
Right. Those murals are explicitly designed to be painted, repainted, and argued over. They are never preserved.
Never.
The Golden Eagles accept that creation is temporary, but the act of creating is vital. So ask yourself, if your greatest, most beautiful work was guaranteed to be erased and painted over by someone else tomorrow, would you still put your whole heart into making it today?